Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10 o'clock p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, Friday night, and June the 24th. I'm glad to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us, 30-minute live internet stream radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open there. I did pop the link into there, what I wanted to look at. I've got a few articles I wanted to actually look at, and mainly that's what we're going to look at tonight. I haven't been doing too many of my evening shows lately. I've just been so busy, and there's been a lot of stuff going on in my life, and wasn't able to do a lot of evening shows, but I've been doing the morning shows, one child abuse survivor to another. And so I'm kind of getting back in the swing of things now, so I'm glad to be able to be back to do my evening shows, and I should be able to be back Monday, Wednesday, Friday nights to do these shows. I do like to bring out information that I see out there. I have stuff coming into my inbox all the time from Child Welfare Information Gateway and different places dealing with, what's happening with, child abuse prevention and taking a look at what's happening out there, because that's what I do. I'm an advocate, standing up to fight and to stop child abuse, right? So it's good to be back, and I just thank everybody for tuning into all my shows and, hanging in here with me. And, it's been since November 2009 I've been doing these shows and have a lot of people listening, and I do appreciate it. So we'll get right into this article. This is something I found just in my inbox, and it was from it's from Child Welfare Information Gateway, and it's a link that they posted on their site, and it's from the Catholic News Agency, and that's www.catholicnewsagency.com, and it's a new child protection leader says church can help society fight sex abuse, and I'll just give you the full title. Yeah, new child protection leader says church can help society fight sex abuse by Marianne Medlin. And this was, I'll see if I can find the date when this was posted, June 14th. So June 14th, they said here, the new head of the U.S. Bishop's Youth Protection Office said that the Catholic Church has the ability to challenge other groups in society to improve their approach to preventing child sex abuse. So they said, quote unquote, we have an opportunity here to lead by example, said Deacon Bernard V. Nojadera, who was recently appointed as leader of the Bishop Conference's Secretariat for Child and Youth Protection. So, he quote-unquote, child sex abuse is not just a church issue. This is a societal issue, he told CNA in a June 10th interview. And he says a former director of the San Jose Diocese Youth Protection Office in California, Deacon Nojadera, will begin his new position in Washington, D.C. on August 15th. He succeeds Teresa Kettlecamp, who has headed the Bishop's office since 2005. So it says the deacon brings a wealth of practical experience with him in this new role, including his decades-long work with children who have been abused and neglected. I've been blessed to become friends with some of the survivor victims that I've worked with, and they have shown me their journey through their eyes, he said, quote-unquote. Those experiences have given me the ability to do what I have done in the San Jose office, and I'll hopefully be able to carry that out when I go to Washington, D.C., quote-unquote. A husband and father of two who has served in the U.S. Marine Corps, Deacon Nojadera said his work with child victims began after he received a master's degree in social work from San Jose State University in 1991. After being hired at a local clinic, quote-unquote, he ended up getting assigned to work with families and children, specifically those who had been neglected and or abused, he recalled. That ended up being the bulk of my work. Deacon Nojadera said that since news of sex abuse within the church broke in 2002, bishops in the U.S. Church have made dealing with the issue a top priority, so much so that others could benefit from their example. What we have here is the ability to hopefully become change agents, he said, to help create shifts in attitude, shifts in heart and mind about the evil of abuse, quote unquote. I like what he says there. This is just so what it is. You know what I mean? We really have to. I've heard other people say it too, not just this Deacon Nojadera, but I've heard other people, who are advocates and standing up to, publicly speak out against child abuse and continue this fight against child abuse, say it is really going to have to be the hearts and minds of people that are changed, if we're going to stop child abuse, because we have to stop the cycle of abuse and the fact that people choose to make these wrong choices for their children and on behalf of their children for whatever reason. They are hurting children and killing children and, sexually using children, and it's got to stop. And we really have to change the way society feels about children. And it's, a whole lot of really backward thinking and sheer ignorance, really, on many people's parts for doing what they do to children, and it's so preventable. Child abuse is 100% preventable. And the reason why it is because it's a choice. Abuse is a choice. When you actually study what abuse is, I do a lot of that. I look into, what is abuse? What really is abuse? So I went and studied abuse, period. Took a look at it. And it is a choice. It's something that people choose to do. No one is forced to abuse anybody. No one has to. They're not. Now we've seen cases, where there have been cases that reported throughout the years where people have been held at gunpoint and told that if, they didn't abuse this child or somebody else that they would be killed. Now that's what, you would call, I guess, somebody being forced into abusing another person or child. But, that's rare. Most of this is choices that people make. They choose to do these horrible things to children, whether it's physical abuse, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse, whether it's neglect, whether it's child sexual abuse. They're choosing to do it. There's rarely somebody standing there with a gun or a knife pointed at them saying you have to do this. This is a choice they're making on behalf of these children, whether it's the mother, the father, the grandparents, the aunt, uncle, cousin, whoever, brother, sister, somebody in the family, or neighbor, daycare personnel, church workers, teachers, doctors, coaches, mentors. These are people that are making the wrong choices, and they are hurting children and abusing children. People think abuse, what is abuse? Well, abuse hurts, let me tell you. Every bit of it. And it's not right. No child should ever be abused. It's just ridiculous that people think it's okay to do these things to children, and it's not. It's not okay. So I like what he has to say here. He says, quote unquote, what we have here is the ability to hopefully become change agents, he said, to help create shifts in attitude, shifts in heart and mind about the evil of abuse. And I really like what he said, because that's so true. This generation needs to be the generation that changes this. Why not? I can't think of anything better to do really than to, for myself, because this is what my passion is really is children around the world, not just North America, but worldwide. Change the issue. Let's do it now. Why should we put this off for another 10 generations? People say, well, it's just too costly, or it's just too, how are we going to do it? It's too time consuming. Well, everybody needs to get involved, and yes, it is too costly, but it's costing, a bundle already because of child abuse. Why not just stop it once and for all? And people say, how are you going to do that? You have to change the hearts and minds of people. Exactly. And a lot of it has to do with education. It has to do with, a lot of it has to do with education. If we can get people, young people before they have their children, to realize that abuse is wrong, and to promote healthy parent-child relationships, to let them know that there are always options, and that they don't have to hurt and kill their children. There's always an option. You don't have to hurt your child. No one ever has to hurt a child. They do it because they either think that they don't have another option, and that's what they use to control the child, or that's what they use to do whatever they're trying to do to meet their own needs, or it's just a cycle, passed down generation to generation, or for, whatever reason, they're just neglecting the child, or they're sexually using the child for their own gratification. It's absolutely horrific, and it's got to stop. And people, people, you take a look at some of these headlines out here, what people are doing to children, and you think these are people that could be living right next to you. These are people that could be living right next to me and just down the street. You know what I mean? We know that child abuse is happening. 1 in 3 to 4 girls, 1 in 6 to 7 boys will be sexually abused in some way under the age of 18. Now that's the facts, and that's all based on stats done from research, reports, and federal funded studies. And that's what the government reports. 1 in 3 to 4 girls and 1 in 6 to 7 boys will be sexually abused under the age of 18. Well, that's ridiculous. That's way too many, and that's anything from molestation to exploitation to rape. This is horrific, and it's got to stop. When you take a look at the other stats for the different types of child abuse, it all pretty much fits right in there. 1 in 3 to 4 girls and 1 in 6 to 7 boys. It's all about the same, and 90 to 95% of that is perpetrated in the home by somebody that the child knows and trusts. So whether it's a parent, family member, or somebody who knows who knows that child has a relationship with this person. They know this person. 90 to 95% of abuse, right? It's rarely stranger danger. It's almost always somebody the child is left to trust with. Like, who has access to these children? This is a big question. Who has access to these children that are being abused? Well, it's generally the people that have access to them, which would be the parents, a family, siblings, relatives of some type, or a family friend, close family friend, neighbors. Sometimes it's daycare workers, babysitters, coaches and clubs, after school activity, places where your children go for after school activities and whatnot. Just any number of things. Schools, teachers, doctors. Doctors are arrested for child abuse as well, and many times it's child sexual abuse. Anybody, and no one's excluded here. You know what I mean? It's absolutely horrific that people think that they should be allowed to get away with this stuff. There's people that would complain and say, "Oh, how come all these people are just making so much noise about child abuse? Who cares?" Well, you know what? There's a whole lot of us that do care. And for all the people that are saying, why should people care? There has to be something wrong with those people, because children, they're human beings like you and me. They're just vulnerable, extremely vulnerable, and they need all the help they can get. So this article goes on to say that the Deacon Nohadera said that bishops have also learned from past mistakes in dealing with sex abuse cases and are on the societal forefront in pushing dialogue on the issue. And they said that I think that these have all been pluses as far as making the reality of child sex abuse a priority in the church, he said. And so the deacon observed that despite the church having the lowest number of abuse cases as compared to other institutions across the U.S., one incident is still one too many. And that's true, and I like that. And I think this is important, to note that people are starting to admit that, one is too many, right? One child being abused is too many. How can you justify, how can we say, well, it's okay, there was only, 289,000 children, nationwide, who were abused in the last 2 months. I mean, how can you say what number is acceptable? There is no acceptable number, because none of it is acceptable. So one is too many, and I agree with that, and I totally stand by it. He says here, he also noted the church's obligation to speak out against other societal ills in addition to child sex abuse. He said, I would not remiss to not acknowledge or identify the realities of elder abuse, domestic violence, spousal abuse, fiduciary abuse. He said, adding that the church's consistent stance against all forms of abuse give it the opportunity to influence others, quote unquote. And in addition to his background in social work, Deacon Nohadera also holds a master's degree in theology from St. Patrick's Seminary in Menlo Park. And he's also been a member of the San Jose Police Department Internal Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, the YWCA Rape Crisis Center, and the County of Santa Clara Interfaith Clergy Project for Elder Abuse Prevention. And he was ordained a deacon in 2008 and has headed the San Jose Diocesan Child Protection Office since 2002. An impressive resume is just one of the aspects that have earned Deacon Nohadera the praise of his colleagues. And they said that Deacon Nohadera brings to this position valuable experience from many areas. And Monsignor David Mallory, General Secretary of the Bishops' Conference, who appointed him for the role, he is a family man and trained social worker who is familiar with the church, both at the parish and diocesan level, and with the law enforcement. He understands the need for child protection services in all areas. So this is just awesome, and so it's a neat little article, and I think that's good, because it shows that there are people that do care, and even within the church, this whole thing about the whole sex abuse scandals and all this stuff going on between, the many multi-thousand cases that are coming to the forefront of children who have been abused within the church walls, within church systems. It's absolutely horrific and pathetic, and I see a lot of it just because of what I do, as far as being an advocate fighting against child abuse. I see all kinds of stuff out there, especially on social networking sites, where there's groups of people that have banded together who are survivors of child sexual abuse, and there's many groups of these people who have been abused within the church. And, that's so, people would say, well, that's even worse than being abused anywhere else. Well, I don't think so. It's about the same. It's all horrific, and it's all got to stop. And, people think they would be safe in church. They would think that children would be safest in the church. You would think so, right? I mean, because they're, obviously what the church represents, you know what I mean? And a safe haven for everybody, but there's evil everywhere. I mean, if you want to call it evil, whatever you want to call it, it's disgusting and it's horrible, and there's no excuse for it. And we have a whole group of people, who have been, who were guilty of abusing children sexually and in every other way, and hiding behind some sort of church walls, church rules, and church robes, right? And this is really disgraceful. So I'm glad to see an article like this come out, where they're actually talking about, there are people within the church, I'm sure, that do care, and don't feel that anybody should be excluded from the law. You know what I mean? Because the law is the law. You break the law, you do the crime, you do the time. And these people, people need to realize that churches are not safe, schools are not safe, homes are not safe, children are being abused everywhere. It doesn't matter where they are. That's why it's very important if you're a parent and you're listening to my shows, you're listening to anything like this, make sure that you do understand how to protect your children. Even if you do understand how to protect your children and you do all the things that, you should do and you get the latest information on how to protect your family and how to protect your children, they are still vulnerable, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be abused by somebody at some point. But it's better to get the information than live in fear. And it's also better to get the information than to just leave yourself wide open, right? And so I think that's the important thing. You want to get that information, learn to keep yourself safe. I had to plug in my headphones there because running out of battery power there. So that was a good article that I just, I think it was just worth taking a look at. I saw another one. This is an article that came from the information from Child Welfare Information Gateway as well, and Child Welfare in the News, and it just pops into my inbox, right? So I just have this set up. So I have all kinds of information coming in all the time. I don't necessarily have to go looking for too much of it because it just pops into my inbox, and it saves me a lot of time. This particular article is from ktxs.com, www.ktxs.com, Texas. Child abuse cases in Abilene reach a 3-year high. And this, I'll give you the date when this was posted. This was posted June 14th by Jocelyn Tovar, Tovar, KTXS News. Abilene, Texas. Abilene police tell KTXS stress from the bad economy and even parents who are too young can be to blame for increased child abuse, but more arrests mean they're doing their job. Police arrested 22-year-old Jessica Perkins last night for hitting her 2-year-old so hard it left bruises. At the same time, 43-year-old Benny Munoz also turned himself into Abilene police. They arrested him for indecency with a child by exposure. And child abuse, physical and sexual has always been around since Sergeant Len Beard with Abilene police. It's unfortunately nothing new, quote unquote. And Sergeant Beard said one of the main reasons we've seen more arrests lately is there's been an increase in the number of reports. So if you can prevent it in the beginning and the child says something, Sergeant Beard said, that's how you can prevent the child from being a victim. Programs like the We Help Ourselves or WHO program have been teaching big country children since 1987 to come forward if they've been a victim of abuse. And the flip side of that, see, this is only recent. I mean, you think about this, 1987. That's when they started to really incorporate this stuff into schools. To let students know that there are telephone numbers that they can phone, and that it's okay to phone and get some help. If they can't get help in their immediate area and there's nobody in their family that will help them, and there's nobody that they don't feel comfortable coming forward, they can make a phone call and get some help. I mean, this is so important for children to know this, but this is very recent. They act like that's a long time, like 1987. Programs like the We Help Ourselves or WHO program have been teaching big country, which is Texas, children since 1987 to come forward. So 1987, I mean, that's not that long ago, right? This is relatively new. I know when I was going to school in the 70s, there was one little hour-long program at our school talking about abuse, and they actually brought in a couple of people. I don't even know who they were. They were talking about abuse and showing some slides, and letting the kids know that abuse is wrong, and that if they're being abused, that they could talk to them after the class, or they could tell their teacher, or they could get some help, tell the principal or somebody, the school counselor. We were all very young, so this would have been elementary school, right? And so, I remember seeing this stuff, and I was abused as a child, so it freaked me out to see. I thought for sure I'd be in trouble. Like, I was like, oh my God, they're going to see right through me. They're going to know I was abused. This was what was going on in my mind. Probably because I was watching this stuff on the video about abuse. It scared me because I recognized that that's what was happening to me. And so I thought, oh my God, and I started to get nervous, and I started to sweat, and started to shake really in my boots, in my desk, And I thought, oh my God, they're going to know. They're going to know I've been abused. And that's exactly the fear that came over me. Even though, CPS was involved in our case, we had social workers visiting our home. My parents were brought up on charges. I still wasn't comfortable with anyone knowing about it. I don't know, why. You know what I mean? I try to go back and think about the way I was feeling at that age. But it's very important for kids to know that there is an option, and to be, that it's okay to tell, that they need to tell an adult. They need to tell somebody they can trust. So, they need to get to somebody that they really can trust, and get some help, you know what I mean? Because this is all relatively new. And I think, a lot of the schools now, I'd like to say, are doing a lot of this prevention work, but, it's not as widespread as you think. And I think there's many schools that actually still probably don't really address the situation and address the issue. They might be addressing violence within the school, peer-to-peer violence, but I don't think they're really doing a great job at addressing child abuse, and it's just because it's upsetting and nobody really wants to deal with it. I'd like to see, national and international programs, mandatory programs in schools where students have to take these courses and have to learn, proper parenting skills, proper parent-child relationships, and that, there's always options, there's always choices, and that, if they're being abused, they need to get help, and really make it something that they're comfortable talking about, something that they're comfortable with, because that's why many children will not get help, because they're not, first of all, if they do tell somebody and their first response, this adult or whoever they tell's response is disgust, and it causes them shame. Right? If the other person, if they tell somebody, that so-and-so is doing something to them, and hurting them or sexually abusing them in some way, if the other person responds negatively and isn't disgusted or upset, it scares the child. The child will quite often retract their statement. They will take it back. They'll say, no, I was just lying, or no, that's not the truth, or whatever. They'll get out of that statement just because it upset them that that this person who they trusted enough to tell made the wrong choice in their response. So it's really important for people to get the information on how to respond to somebody. You need to know what to do if a child comes to you and tells you they've been abused. You need to know how to handle that, because 1 in 3 to 4 girls will be abused, and 1 in 6 to 7 boys will be abused under the age of 18. So chances are a child could come to you and they could, disclose to you in some way that they're being abused, or you could notice signs and symptoms, and you could be like, oh my God, I think that child's being abused. And what are you going to do? You need to know, everybody needs to know how to properly report child abuse and how to handle it, because you can ruin a case for a child and they can end up back in the home, right? It's very important. So anyway, they said that in this article, because this is all about the fact that, this abuse cases, child abuse in Abilene reach a 3-year high, right? This is absolutely horrible. So even though they're teaching this in the schools, it's reaching a 3-year high. They said the flip side of that is it drives child abuse numbers up because you have more reports, which is what you want. So it makes the numbers look bad because, that people think, oh, there's more abuse, but is it more abuse, or is it just that people are reporting it, right? And that's the big question. They said we have a fairly good system in place here. And they said Beard says these programs are so important that even given the state's $27 billion budget shortfall, the child abuse programs are typically one of the last areas to be cut. So that's really good to know. And that's in Texas. I know in Texas there was another article. I can't even remember what it was from, but I know it's probably been like at least 7 months since I came across this article, but they said there was this one place in Texas that had so many child abuse cases, and children were waiting for help on waiting lists, that it was going to take 6 months to get to some of these children. These children were actually removed from their homes because of abuse. It was proven. It was a substantiated case. And these children were waiting lists, and they weren't even getting help for like 6 months. That's how much That's how much child abuse was in this one area in Texas. I can't remember what the name of the town was, but this is just sort of stuff that kind of comes out along the way that you can kind of see when you're actually keeping track and sort of paying attention to what's actually happening out there. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrific. There's places where, domestic violence shelters. I live in Calgary, Alberta, and we have domestic violence shelters here, and these protected ones where you don't know where they are and they're hidden away and for the protection of the people that are using these shelters, the women mainly. We do have, I think, one men's shelter here too. There's quite a few domestic violence shelters, and they're full all the time. The newspapers report quite often, the fact that these domestic violence shelters are full all the time. Women and are running for their lives, trying to save their lives and their children's lives, and this stuff, people don't think about that in your daily walk, unless you know somebody who's been abused, or you happen to, a neighbor or something, or you happen to hear something from somebody that it's so you don't hear about it if you don't know about it, but you wouldn't realize that the shelters are full all the time. So the child care facilities are full all the time. Just because we might not see it in our daily walk doesn't mean this stuff isn't happening. And so nationally, this is a crisis. It's a real crisis, nationwide and internationally, obviously. And it's absolutely horrific, and I hope we can get this stopped, because it's so incredibly wrong. And the more we can do to get the education and the word out to people, the better, because it just does need to stop. This next article, we just have a few minutes to take a look at it, but this is NewJersey.com, www.nj.com, and DYFS head to explain to judge how case of 8-year-old see if I can get this, Irvington girl was handled. So DYFS head to explain to judge how case of 8-year-old Irvington girl was handled. This was posted by Susan K. Livio, State House Bureau, Monday, June 13th. And this is Irvington Department of Children and Families Commissioner Allison Blake will appear before a federal judge today to describe how the hotline appears to have mishandled a call last month, 9 days before an 8-year-old Irvington girl was found dead in her home. So somebody mishandled a hotline call, and an 8-year-old girl was found dead in her home. Blake was already scheduled to appear before U.S. District Court Judge Stanley R. Chesler to discuss the latest progress report on New Jersey's 8-year-old effort to improve its billion-dollar child welfare system. But the report is likely to be overshadowed by the stunning revelation Friday that a child abuse hotline screener received an anonymous call May 13th about the appearance and well-being of children at the same address where the Division of Youth and Family Services had investigated 4 complaints of abuse and neglect from 2006 to 2008. Investigators at that time deemed all 4 reports unfounded, but required the mother undergo a psychiatric exam and accept a parental aid in the home in May 2006. The recent anonymous caller's tip was not linked to an existing history, and I'm concerned that connection was not made, said Blake, who oversees the child welfare system, known as the Division of Youth and Family Services, DYFS. The hotline staff coded the call in the automated system as an information referral entry, requiring no action by investigators, she said Friday. Christiana Glenn, 8, was found dead at her Irvington home May 22nd, the result of untreated broken leg and malnutrition, authorities say. Her mother, Vanette Ovilda, 29, has pleaded not guilty to aggravated manslaughter and child endangerment charges. Ovilda's roommate, Miriam Janvier, 23, pleaded not guilty to child endangerment charges. Blake said Friday she planned to inform U.S. District Court Judge Stanley R. Chesler about the findings of her internal investigation into the Christiana Glenn case at 1 p.m. today, when federal court monitor Judith Meltzer will present her latest progress report. So they said not enough progress, and this is horrible. Like, an 8-year-old girl is dead because they coded the call wrong, and so this is really bad. And I hope that everybody realizes that this stuff happens all the time. The children slip through cracks all the time, And these, this little 8-year-old girl, she should have had a chance to live, and somebody should have got her some help. Obviously they screwed up because they left a child in a home where there was a report made, multiple reports made over the years, and they deemed it as a no action necessary, just a referral, and that girl's dead, And I mean, this is so incredibly sad. Make the phone call, and make the phone call and then follow up. If you suspect abuse, you make the phone call. You do the right thing. Abused children are not happy. I will tell you that. A lot of people think, I don't want to break up a happy home. Well, I don't want to make the phone call. You make the phone call. You could save a child's life, So you do make the phone call, right? Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'll be back on the weekend. You can check the show page. I'll be back on next week as well, one child abuse survivor to another. And, I just wish you all well, and I hope you have a good weekend. And take good care of yourselves. Look out for the kids in your own life, Make sure they're not being abused, right? Do all you can to stop child abuse. We really have to stop this mess. It is up to us, and, do it. If we all do something, it all adds up, right? So, if everybody's doing something, it does make a huge, huge difference. So do whatever you can to stand up for child rights and save a child's life. Have a great night, everybody. Talk to you real soon.